we are officially back to live on Facebook for the Thursday edition of the Not Your Average Investor Show, the JWB Rental Income Property of the Week. I'm your host, Pablo Gonzalez. Greg is not with us today, so we got a guest co-host, Jim Marshall. He is the Director of Construction here at JWB. We heard from our community that they wanted to talk a little bit more about the construction scope, so we got Jim joining us today. Welcome to the show, Jim.
Thank you.
How you feeling, man? You excited for the first?
Absolutely. Ready to go.
All right, he's ready to go, folks. Prepped with notes and everything. And joining us from South Africa, our guest investor today is Willem Botha. Welcome to the show, Willem. It's great to have you, man.
Thank you very much. Nice to be here.
All right. And now that we got that part of it, I got a little bit more song and dance to go. I want to welcome our community. I want to tell you that if you want to learn about rental income properties and investing in them, you want to learn about property management for rental property investors, if you want to get an edge on the Jacksonville market, you're in the right place. If you want some personalized advice on it, go to chatwithjwb.com, book a call with one of our experts, and you're going to get some really, really good feedback on your own specific situation. And now it's time to welcome the community. It's time for the roll call. You guys ready for the roll call?
Absolutely.
Yes.
It's my favorite part. All right. Danny Davis says howdy. Noah Randari, hello everyone. John Henning, good afternoon all. We got Joanna, our community manager in the house. We got Drew Barnhill saying good afternoon. We got Leo saying good morning from California. We got Lee Bishop, the MVP of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, saying hello. We got Anthony Ditta from South Florida. Greetings, friends. Chris Gonzaga from the Hudson Valley, New York. Good to have you back, Chris. We got Carl Thompson saying hi, NYAI peeps. Hi to you, Carl. Who else? We got Madison in the house, our marketing teammate here at JWB, helping you out here in the chat. She's saying hello. Greg Stone, howdy to you, Greg. We got the first family of the Not Your Average Investor Show. We got the patriarch Ken, the matriarch Carolyn, and the Duchess Karen Malene. Welcome all of you to the show as well. We got Marilyn Cotterman from Homosassa, Florida, the home of the manatees. Marilyn, good to have you back again. Jen Filson, the fairy godmother of the Not Your Average Investor Show community, in here from Monterey. Good to have you. Bill Shields, buenas tardes, amigos. Buenas tardes, Bill Shields. We got Medj Garcia's back. Medj, it's good to see you. I saw you Tuesday. I hadn't seen you in a while. Good to have you back. Anybody else? Am I missing anybody? I think we have welcomed everybody. I'm happy to kick this thing off. Willem, let's start with you as our guest investor. What is your investing? You're in South Africa, man. What is your investing experience here in the US? You got an interesting story.
Yeah, no, started back in South Africa more than 20 years ago, but since 5 years back, I had the opportunity to start with a turnkey investment in the US, start buying in Memphis. So did 3 properties in Memphis. Things changed a little bit, cash flows, rent, interest rates, all of the things that always happens, and the availability just became crazy, nothing to be found. So looking out for more investors, and ended up with JWB. And specifically when we start looking for the second round of this exercise, we wanted new construction. So that's how we ended up with JWB, and got our first one under contract, and that's the story.
Yeah. I heard you're about to close, and now you get to be a guest investor on the show. It's a big couple of days for you here happening, right?
Indeed.
All right. And we got Jim Marshall, right? We heard from our community that you had some construction questions, right? And how that process goes. So if you have questions for Jim, for myself, or for Willem about any of this stuff, I would love to have you start populating it in the Q&A. We're going to open up a section for Q&A a little bit later in the call, and then we're going to go into the property, into Willem's story. But for now, Jim, tell us a little bit about your role here, how long you've been on board, kind of what you're overseeing these days.
Well, I'm the director of construction here. I've been associated with JWB since about 2014. Previous to that, I spent about 20 years in the new construction business for a large regional builder. Probably was responsible for building about 2,000 homes myself. I'm a licensed general contractor, a licensed home inspector. I've probably been in the business longer than I'd like to admit. I started working for my dad, who was in the construction business, retired at 75 as a construction superintendent. So I kind of grew up in the business. I designed and built my own house, and I really got disillusioned with the new construction market back in 2008 when the bottom dropped out, and we went from about 160 employees down to about 12. And I got associated with JWB, and JWB because we get into so many different types of properties, renovating properties and new construction, it really is set up to kind of weather the storm, the ups and downs in the market. And of course, I was really drawn in by the culture here and the openness and the accountability of the company. And I'm just excited to be here. New construction is a challenging business to be in right now because there's so much of it going on. And we can talk about that a little bit later too, but that's kind of my story.
Interesting, man. So, I don't know if you know much of my story, but I was in construction for 15 years prior to this. And I entered, my career started off in the early 2000s when the housing boom was happening.
Right.
And 2009 had to completely reinvent myself kind of
Right.
thing, right? So I've been through those ups and downs too. I'm curious, I don't see a lot of culture like they have here at JWB in construction companies. Did you come from a workplace that kind of had these like core values and this like kind of like big company thinking, or was it very like transactional and not so relational?
The company I was working with for 20 years was a privately held company. And back when the business was really booming and we had a large staff, we did have a pretty good culture.
That's great.
But it really didn't measure up to the culture here at JWB. And when we went through the downsizing and letting a lot of people go and the stress of the next 8 years that were just kind of lean, it was really hard to get that culture back. My experience in construction in general is that you don't have that kind of culture.
Yeah.
A lot of construction professionals jump from company to company and don't really spend a lot of time in one place. And that's what I really like here is the way they're trying to build a future with a team that can go on for a long period.
It's cool, man. All right, right on. Willem, you ready to get into this, ready to pop this property on here and you give us your best insights?
Yes, for sure.
Let's do it, man. All right, let's go to our featured property here. We're going to magically whisk ourselves away to 2020 Day Avenue, Jacksonville, Florida, 32254. It is a $145,000 price point home, 2-bedroom, 1-bathroom. We've got a estimated rent range of $950 and a total monthly cash flow of $101 and a total estimated financing ROI of 8.22%. Let me know in the chat if you can see it. If you're joining us on the radio or you're joining us in the podcast, you can go to jwbinventory.com and download this sheet. And yes, this home is available right now. So if you like what you're seeing, you can go to chatwithjwb.com or call your portfolio manager and you can hop in. Willem, as our guest investor, when you were looking at this property appreciation sheet, what is the first thing that you're looking at?
Cash flow obviously is important. Okay, this sheet obviously on the terms of the return on investment, looking at the percentages there, and that's something that caught me a little bit off guard, to be honest, from the first time, because you've got all three types, your cash and your non-recourse and conventional. So in terms of non-recourse was our problem initially, because that's where we thought we would fall into the categories. But we ended up at conventional, which is very nice. Things that we don't know at all from South Africa's perspective is the loan terms. And then that obviously makes a interesting difference in terms of return on investment as well, and then specifically cash flow for sure.
Tell me a little bit more about that, Willem, right? So you're saying you got caught off guard because you thought you saw three numbers originally. I'm originally from South America. I know that outside of the US, people are not used to as much, being lent money to spend on things. People mostly like save up to buy something right off the bat. Tell me a little bit more about getting caught off guard with seeing these three different options.
Okay, yeah, obviously from the cash one, that was simple, and we know we're not going to buy cash because we want the leverage part of things.
Yeah.
But there is definitely and whether that is a lack of knowledge or just the way things happens between different states. Our first three properties was bought with what is considered or called non-recourse in financing. And so that was the question I asked here. Because I'm a foreign investor, I thought that is the only way I could get a property from JWB. And as things progressed and I learned more from these shows, I realized that this is more something that they use in terms of the pension or what is your retirement annuities type of money from your investment and on that side. So Yes, so I've asked the wrong questions, and I thought we should, or we can only get non-recourse loans. So yeah, I was quite amazed by the fact that we could get conventional financing as a foreigner.
Got it. Okay, that makes a lot of sense. So you thought that you would have to use, so non-recourse financing, the way that you understood it is essentially using your retirement accounts, and you didn't think that you'd be able to get a conventional line of credit as a foreigner, and that was your first path in. That's what you thought you could do, but you didn't think to ask how I could get the line of credit, or was it just not available back then?
No, it was actually something a bit more confusing. Because the first 3 properties was purchased with non-recourse loans, which was a 40% down, basically just a quick 40% down, 7.25% interest over 10 years. So that was the terms. But it's also a no questions asked loan. So if you got your 40%, you got the loan. There was no questions asked. So when I started dealing with JWB and got to the lenders, I said, I'm a foreigner. I'm looking for a non-recourse loan, because that's all I knew, and that's the way we used it in Memphis. So they come back and says, no, you can't get a non-recourse loan. and that actually got, and I initially had my own lender, and another thing, JWB doesn't allow you to use your own lender. So that caused a problem for me, because I had the opportunity to get conventional finance from my own lender, but JWB doesn't allow that. And on the first contact with JWB lenders, because of the way I present the question, I actually couldn't get the right answer, which means initially I couldn't get the loan sorted out. And that took me a bit of retries and more education before I asked the right questions.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And that is one of the big reasons why we have this show, is so we can educate folks and you can get to the right answers and know what questions to ask in order to facilitate your investing journey. Real quick, before I ask Jim a little bit more about the construction side, you said you have 3 other properties. You got them in Memphis. What is, as far as this cash flow of $101 and this total conventional ROI of 8.22%, that you got into a couple of years ago or a year or so ago, how does this compare to the properties that you had already purchased, and how does it compare to the property that you now are under contract?
Cash flow is good in Memphis because there's a 40% down. So obviously the higher the down payment, the higher the cash flow. So it skews the values a little bit, because it's a lot of money to put down. In terms of return on investment, cash on cash return versus return on investment, I would say, and well, maybe on the bottom side, the depreciation, I went into Memphis with, again, no appreciation in mind, which is the same way I'm doing it in Jacksonville, which is the right approach, because we've learned from the past. We've also gone through the period where everything just appreciated ridiculously every single year, and we got very relaxed about it, and then we realized it doesn't happen forever. So yeah. In terms of Memphis side, I think the figures are looking similar, although it's important to note that the Memphis houses is also rehabs. Again, great rehab. Similar to you guys, I can't afford roofs and HVACs and all of those things to be replaced, after you purchase a house. So roof, HVACs, electric, plumbing, the whole tutti. It's a total gut rehab, which is the only way which I considered purchasing. But once we've done that and we're happy with it, little things comes along, that's fine. This time around, we wanted to go for the new construction to sort of try and see how far we can get away without any maintenance, for the first, hopefully, time.
Value property.
Yeah, and that's another thing that happened. Yes, obviously the property we're now going under contract with is 255. So we also moved our mindset a little bit from, instead of 10 for 110,000, let's go for 5, double the value.
Yeah, that makes sense. So what's the mindset on that, as far as that shift in mindset that you had to do? Tell me a little bit about that.
It was forced due to the lack of inventory and obviously the lack of cash flow. So I was happy to carry on with my Memphis properties. better the devil you know, as they say. So the provider is great. I'm very happy with it. And I was forced to go and look somewhere else because there was no inventory and the cash flow became negative. So, to get $100 or $150 a month is nothing, it's for I don't think it's the meaning of that is not that you're going to retire on that for 150. It just doesn't work. But if you move from 150 positive to minus 10, it's just not making sense anymore. And that's what happened. And therefore we ended up looking for new construction with a positive cash flow. And that's how we ended up with JWB.
Excellent, man. Great point of the pain point, right? Like Greg talks about it a lot on the show. It's not the cash flow. It's not this $100 a month that's going to make you rich. But if you have to go negative into it every single month, then it's just not a scalable thing because you're going to have to come out of pocket and you're not going to be able to acquire more properties. So thanks for bringing that piece up. We talk a lot about that on the show. You started talking about how new construction and rehabs and how this is a rehab, Jim. I think this is a really good time to kind of start picking your brain a little bit about this. So this is clearly a home that will be renovated before it gets given to an investor. Can you tell us a little bit about the process of when you take over this home, what's going to go into something like this?
Well, obviously, our main goal in looking at these renovations is to provide an asset that's not going to have a tremendous amount of upfront cost right away. So we do look at a sort of a 10-year window. If the roof doesn't have 10 years left in it, then we'll replace the roof. We look at the air conditioning, we look at the plumbing. We always repipe a house as far as water pipes if there's anything other than CPVC. Those galvanized pipes and some of the older PEX and the polybutylene pipes can have problems leaking. One of the things that a lot of renovators don't look at is the cast iron drain lines. We go in and we run a camera down all the drain lines, and if there's any degradation of the cast iron, then we redrain the house, which basically means we take all the cast iron out and put PVC in so that doesn't fail during the construction. Now, on an off-grade home like this home, you could get under the house and do that, so it isn't quite as costly. But on a slab home, you're talking about jackhammering the floors, moving the resident out, very costly. Could be upwards of $11,000 if you do that with someone in the home. So the idea behind it is try to get this property so that it produces as little, large scale maintenance items in the first 10 years. Obviously, a new construction home is going to have some warranties on it. Everything is new. A lot of the technology is newer, so you're going to get a lot more lastability, but then you're paying more for that property up front. So the idea behind it here is you're getting a cheaper property. So there is going to be a little bit of risk, but we have kind of identified what we think are the things that would most likely fail during the first 10 years, and we address those. The other big thing we try to do is insurance is a big issue now. A lot of insurance companies are denying coverage for homes with certain types of pipe and certain types of wiring, and there's electrical panels that have been recalled by the manufacturer. So since we've done so many homes over the years, we know what to look for when we go in these houses, and we try to take care of those things that could possibly be an issue with an insurance carrier somewhere down the road as well.
Got it. So, when you're explaining all of this, kind of hearing what Willem was saying of he doesn't want to, take on the burden of these different costs when he's just newly buying a home. So it's just kind of proactively before you turn it over to an investor, make sure you're mitigating all that stuff. And the big ones, roof, plumbing, HVAC, those kinds of things, you're going into that, and then you're going even a step further into doing those drain tests and all that different stuff.
And on a home like this, it was built in 1920, one of the risks are wood rot or termites underneath. So we get in there and we look for those type of issues that could possibly come up. We don't open every single wall and completely gut this house down to the studs, but because of our experience in renovating these, sometimes the signs, we can see the signs that could lead to that, and we try to address those.
Got it. Okay, great. All right. So I think right now we've got a question for you from Chris Gonzaga. So if you're joining us on the radio, we do this show live on Thursdays at 12:30. You can join us by going to nyais.com. I don't know if you guys know this, but we're now showing the show on the radio as well. So, you guys are radio famous. And you can join us there. If you're on Facebook, you can just click on the link and join us live right now. If you're on the podcast, just register and show up. It's as fun as it sounds. But we got a question here from Chris Gonzaga. He asks, hey, Jim, how is JWB advancing with new technology in the construction industry, insulation, solar, 3D printing, material, and so on? Are you starting to see any new technologies getting adopted?
We are, and a lot of that is being driven by the supply chain issues and the availability of products out there. And when I first heard about 3D printing houses, I kind of thought that was a little bit of a pipe dream. But as I get more into that, I think that is a wave of the future. One of the issues that we have with some of those types of technologies is space. When you're building in a community that has wide open space and you've got empty lots on both sides, it's real easy to stage something like that. In my previous experience, I've done a lot of panelized building where we build the wall panels and the floor panels in a factory and then bring them out. And you can assemble a house from the slab all the way to dried in a day, because those walls are all put together, and that's all done by robotic nail guns and things. So I've had a lot of experience in those type of things that help with the speed of construction as well as the quality of construction. Insulation, there's spray foams now that are available, are offering a lot higher R values. One of the things that came into being when they revamped all the building codes in Florida is they require every 3 years, the code is required to be increased or made a little bit stricter in different areas. And one of them is energy efficiency. So we've all moved to vinyl windows instead of aluminum windows because aluminum windows will sweat. We've moved to low E glass, which basically is a really thin layer of metal on the inside of the glass that reflects the radiant heat so that you don't get as much heat gain at the windows. So there's a lot of technology that goes into it. And then recently in the last year or two, we've had to really look at some different products because the products we typically use aren't available. When we build multifamily and we have to have a fire separation between the units, the product that most people use has been very difficult to get. So
is that like newspaper wet spray kind of thing? Is that what
No, it's actually made out of a gypsum product.
Gypsum, yeah, but it kind of looks like wet newspaper, right? Like when it comes out of it,
It's like a thick drywall. And it has a 2-hour fire rating. And so in order to be able to get the product we need and still meet those codes, we're having to look at different products to get that in there. So there is quite a bit of technology. Some of it's good and some of it's not. A lot of the things that come out, I question them until I see them actually performing for a while. A good example of that is some of the new water pipes. Back in the 80s, they came out with a product called polybutylene. Everybody thought it was the greatest thing out there. And now it's hard to get insurance on a house if you have that because they found that the fittings were blowing apart and splitting out. So sometimes it's good to have products that have a track record and a history, but the new technologies are really helping speed up construction and provide a better quality product.
Interesting. Now, Willem, you own a couple of rental properties in South Africa and you manage them yourself, right? Like, how familiar are you with construction practices down there? Are you seeing 3D printing and all these different things start to happen, or is it kind of the same thing that you used to see before?
No, nothing that advanced yet in South Africa. None of the 3D printing stuff yet. And I think it's mostly because of the brick and mortar type of houses. There's different types of brick and big and small, and the guys actually manufacture them either locally even. But yeah, in terms of the technology side of things, I think to get the supply chain through here for that as well, and the technology that's still fairly expensive and probably coming through in a US dollar term to South Africa. Our exchange rate is also not that pleasant. If you look at it, it's exceed 15 Rand 50 to $1. It is as bad as it sounds. It's a lot of money to get that equipment here.
Yeah, so you're forced to use local materials as much as possible. That makes a lot of sense. We got another good question here from Mike Foster. During rehab, what if you do find termite damage? To what extent do you open up walls to repair all the damage and eliminate active termites?
Well, what we do is we typically, if we see termite damage, we keep opening up the area until we don't see any damage. And then we start inspecting other areas for signs of that. Typically, termites will come up through a mud tube, underneath the house some way. So we try to identify the source of the termites and attack it that way. But we typically will just keep opening up until we see the end of the damage before we stop. We do also, if we see termite damage, we have our pest control company go out and do a full inspection. And they'll do a treatment, which is a fairly costly treatment, about $800 on a house. and then they'll offer a 1-year bond on that.
Got it.
Then it's up to the owner if they want to continue that bond. But we generally will fully inspect that house to make sure that there isn't anything active going on. A lot of the termite damage that we find is old termite damage that happened many years ago, and the termites are no longer there. So that damage isn't getting worse, but that can be identified by a full inspection as well.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, sounds like JWB typical protocol where you guys are kind of like going above and beyond to just make sure that this is going to be a good experience.
Right.
And doing the work on the front end. Sounds good, man. So Drew Barnhill's got a couple good questions here for you, Jim. I was just told that I had a 16-year-old roof in one of my properties and the insurance was higher because of it. Typically, how long would it take for a new roof to prove worthwhile with reduced insurance costs? You got a kind of scope on that?
Well, when you re-roof a house, according to code now, it's required to re-nail the roof deck as well. And I can speak to this from experience because I built my house in 96 and my roof was 26 years old and I just replaced the roof and I got about a $1,200 credit on my homeowner's insurance by having a new roof that had been re-nailed. It was now meeting the current hurricane codes. So, if you replace the roof, it's not just the savings of the shingles themselves, but it's the additional wind loading that you get by having the additional nailing.
Okay. So you reduce insurance rates for wind loading and nailing, or?
Right. Well, what they have is you can get a wind mitigation inspection.
That's right. I've heard
And the
that.
wind mitigation inspection asks what the nailing pattern is on your roof. And if it meets a certain criteria and you have the proper hurricane clips and connections on there, you can get a significant credit on your insurance for that.
Okay.
Because it mitigates the risk of the insurance company if a hurricane comes through.
Yeah. Okay. So something to look at, Drew. I don't know if you probably don't have like a full on like this many years kind of calculation in your head, but there is some opportunities there.
Right. And, mine was a large one because my roof was so old. It was a 26-year-old roof. And there's some other factors too. I replaced my water heater with a water heater that had a moisture detector at the bottom. So if it leaked, I think insurance companies are looking for areas where they can minimize their risk.
Cool.
But
Yeah.
it really depends on the house.
And Chris in the chat is saying last time he spoke with an insurance carrier in Florida, they said 5 years or newer. That makes sense. All right, cool. We got a couple more questions here for Jim, and then we'll dive a little deeper into your story after we knock a couple of these out real quick. Drew's got another one. How do you make a decision on whether a new bathroom is worthwhile in a renovation?
If the fixtures are, not performing well, we typically always replace the fixtures unless they're fairly new. The plumbing, the water pipe delivery system, we always replace if it's anything other than CPVC. The cast iron would be if we see any likelihood of damage.
Okay.
The cost for replacing those after someone's in there and after all the finishes are in is much higher. So it's definitely a payoff.
So you replace fixtures and then definitely the plumbing, if the plumbing isn't working well. Anything as far as like aesthetics, like if the bathroom isn't modern, do you ever like take a look at that? As from a
If
rental
it's in
standpoint?
good shape and it's solid, depending on the home, we typically will leave it.
Cool. Okay, good to know. All right. Last question here, and then we'll get into a little bit more of your story. Willem. Lee Bishop says, thanks for visiting the show, Jim. Greg has talked about some acquired houses from remodel that have needed substantial repairs, and JWB does not pass that on to the investor. Greg has talked about a $45,000 investment to bring the houses up to JWB standards. Here's my question. The houses that JWB acquires, is that number a normal number for repairs or the high end of repairs?
That's probably an average number because we spend as high as $70,000 or $80,000 on jobs. Typically, we don't go into a job with that high of a budget, but if we get in there and find that there's more damage than we could see initially, we just keep spending until we get it to the standard that we believe. But $45,000 right now is about our average. We have some houses we get where we only have to spend $15,000 or $20,000, and then we have some that are $50,000 and $60,000. So 45 is a pretty good average. This particular home that we're featuring has a $48,000 budget or $47,000 budget.
There you go. So there's some hard numbers for you, Lee. So this one is a $48,000 budget. So average about 45, might swing up or down a little bit. Interesting. So you're doing significant work in just about every single house. Great question, Lee, man. I always appreciate you chiming in, and Drew Barnhill has a clarification. He was speaking of adding an extra bathroom. He was in a JWB Reno where they added a new bathroom to take it from a 1.5 to a 2.5.
Yeah, thanks for clarifying that. Yeah, we quite often will add that second bathroom. Adding anything beyond 2 bathrooms doesn't really bring that much value, but going from 1 bathroom to 2 is a significant increase in rent. The cost typically when we add a bathroom, if we're adding it within an existing space, is between $3,500 and $4,500, just depending on the particular situation. But yeah, adding that second bathroom so that you have more than one, and we're talking a full bathroom where there's a shower or a tub, adds a significant value to the house.
Interesting. All right, good stuff, man. Great questions from the audience. Willem, I want to dive back into your story. Before we do that, as far as this home and the things that we have seen here, is there anything else that stands out for you as far as a difference between your experience in Memphis, the new construction home that you're getting? Is there anything else to touch on here?
No, I think what maybe from our side, there was a lot of consideration regarding a garage or not, whether that's good or bad. And it was actually interesting to get all the viewpoints from the different sources, whether a garage is good or bad. Some people store stuff there, might stay longer. So yeah, I think that's something that we've also tried to look at. Nothing specific, anything else that I can quickly see. The septic and the sewer. It's always for us, obviously, I've listened to every time that you guys talk about the septic side of things, but I'm just too scared. I want the city sewer. You've got a great plan. I understand you've got your, there's that warranty or the part that the tenant now pays and maintenance and all of that. But I specifically, from my side, I also went for the house, looked at it, was looking good. First thing I looked after that, okay, is the sewer the city or is it septic?
Well, a couple things on that. We just did an evaluation on our warranty program, which is fairly new. And we determined that in the first almost a year of doing that, we saved our clients over $360,000 on repairs that would have fallen to the owner. So we are planning on expanding that to more of our properties because it has turned out to be a pretty good thing. And the value of it isn't so much that these are failing because septic systems don't last. It's that this warranty comes with 2 inspections per year. So we get to go out there and see if something is going wrong with that and take care of it. Because in a rental property, it's difficult to count on the resident to do that. So by going out there and seeing this, we can head off some costly repairs down the road.
All right, interesting. Okay, so we've talked a little bit about this septic warranty program that you've unleashed. Now you've been testing it. You found $360,000 worth of savings across the portfolio. It's going out to everybody else. For those of you that aren't totally convinced that you don't want a sewer home, you can still pick a sewer home. But yeah, I guess it's good to mitigate for septic. The other thing I want to point out is that this maintenance rate that always shows up here will vary based on the property, whether it's on sewer or septic, right? So it's already baked in whether it is sewer or septic as far as the things that you're looking at. Willem, last question. What'd you learn about the whole garage thing? Do you have any opinion on whether garage or no garage?
We, again, from South Africa's perspective, we are so used to garages that it was nice to actually purchase something with a garage, and it's probably more of a personal opinion, but yeah, I do prefer it, and I think it's a good value add for the house in terms of car being inside and a bit of protection. And yeah, having a garage, I know stuff gets stored there, so hopefully we'll get the tenant a little bit longer in there with his garage and a bit of stuff in storage sort of on the side.
There you go.
Well, the Florida lifestyle, probably half of the garages out there, if not more than half the garages, can't fit a car because of all of the storage that they're using. When we have a home that doesn't have a garage, we normally provide a shed in the yard so that they have a place to put their lawnmower and store a few things. Certainly it's not the size of a garage, but your point's well taken. Most people use it for storage.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I wish Greg was here for this conversation because his garage is like his happy place in the home. Like he's has it really, really well organized. And if anything's out of shape, he goes crazy. But I'll let him tell you that story. Is there any benefit to having this fenced yard?
Yeah, absolutely. People who have pets or maybe have kids and want a little more security, whenever it's feasible to fully fence a yard or replace sections of the fence so that we can get a fenced yard, that's definitely a huge.
Makes sense. Makes sense. And I know, Willem, like, it's fun. It's great talking to you, right? Because there's all these cultural differences of in the US, outside of the US, garage, what it means, yard, what it means. Like I know from Venezuela, it's like if you don't have like a gate fence around your house, it's insane. Whereas here in the US, there's a lot of homes that don't even have a fence yard or anything like that. Was that something that was funny to you when you first started looking at homes out here?
Yeah, I was actually in trouble with the wife when we first visited because I made a point when we went to the service providers. So we went through the houses during the day and we actually drove back at night at 9 o'clock to get the feel of the neighborhood. And by the third night, she says, you know what's going to happen. You're going to get there and there's nothing happening. So yeah, it is very strange to see all the openness, no fences. I mean, unfortunately, with us here, we have to have fences. The crime is unfortunately in such a way that if you don't have a fence, you're looking for trouble. There's still a few houses without fences or the normal 4-foot type of thing. But yeah, it was very interesting to see during our visits to the US how open it is and pleasing, to be honest.
Well, let's talk more about from the investor standpoint. I mean, what is it like to consider investing in the United States in real estate when you're from somewhere else? What is the appeal to going through? I have to assume it's harder for you, right? So like, what's the appeal of going through the hurdles to invest in rental properties in the United States?
For us, it was a matter of timing. So we got to the point in South Africa where we felt we need to diversify. So we had in a few different areas in South Africa, we had property. And because of the way the market went, we had good appreciation like everywhere else in the world probably. And we had the opportunity to sell stuff. And, that almost dream that we could own something in the US was first of all a target to go for. The fact that we could purchase anything that we want by simply having a visa, which is, we looked at Australia, New Zealand, UK, US, and in terms of ease of buying, US was definitely on top of the list. So that was another thing. We loved the country since we first visited it. So there was a lot of benefits, and then to have dollars as part of our investment. Now, our currency is devaluating against the dollar on average 9% a year. I can just basically have a dollar and I would increase it by 9% by simply doing nothing. So if I now have a property that has the potential of increasing and I've got rent coming in and it's in a different currency, which I believe in more. And then that was important for us to have a different currency and a sort of a backup plan. So we decided to split up between South Africa and the US, and therefore that was our diversification was the play for the US. And the service providers made it possible. I would have never tried something like this if the service provider wasn't a real full turnkey provider.
Let's talk about that, right? You mentioned this earlier, that property management services like you have here in the United States doesn't really exist in South Africa. You've had to manage all your own homes. Tell me a little bit about, Nadine would love to know who your property management company is in Memphis, and I'd love for you to share that. And then once you do that, just tell me a little bit about what you look for, being so far, right? Like so far from the properties themselves. What are you looking for to be able to really trust somebody with this like large investment that you're making in order to manage it when you're gone?
The first one, our service provider in Memphis is mid-south home buyers. Yes, there's a waiting list. That's what obviously nobody likes. For me, it was acceptable. I know I'm going to wait months, 6 months, maybe a year. That was part of the plan. So because it took so long to identify the provider, I was happy to, it took me 2 years to source or to make a pick on a provider. So to wait another 6 months or a year was just part of the process. For me, I worked it backwards as they normally, I think it probably came up on your show as well. You start off, in my case, I had to start off with finding the provider so that I eventually can find the house. So once the provider has been identified, then you can look at the house and the property and the neighborhood and all the other stuff that comes along with it. So we obviously definitely work backwards. So I had to find a provider and then I look at the environment around it. Provider-wise, it was absolutely critical for us when we start identifying service turnkey providers is that the turnkey provider, and whether we're talking rehab or new build, let's maybe make it easier. So they have to buy the house, they need to rehab it, they need to put a tenant in there. They need to manage it. There was and maintain it. So there was no way in which we would have moved forward with this if there was anybody else involved, because of finger pointing, somebody blaming somebody else. They should have done this, they should have done that. So that was the main criteria for us in terms of our service provider, is to everything must be in our house. And I know there's obviously divisions inside a company, but whether the construction team is not really JWB stamp on them, I speak to JWB. I don't want to speak to the plumber and I mean, I've got no intention to be involved in any maintenance. I'm luckily, when you start after this, you've got to go back to work. I go back, I'm going to sleep. So, it's nice to be far away from it, because here we are in it. We get the calls at night. Sometimes it wasn't that bad. We had a good run, but we self-manage because there isn't something like a turnkey provider in South Africa. We've got our normal agents, which does rentals, and they would do a rental, and they supposed to do their job, do an exit inspection, get the deposit, this and that. It just doesn't happen. I've unfortunately in 20 years, we've had one agent. Let's be honest, the guys in Jeffreys Bay. So we had one agent where I could say, what, that was somebody that I could trust, and they did a good job for us. But that's also holiday rental short term. In terms of long term stuff, there is just simply nothing that comes close to the product and the method in which it is working in the US. And that was the reason for us to move the investment from rand to dollar and actually now become passive, because this is now, I know we are involved, but this is our passive answer, because we're not getting the calls, we're not doing the maintenance. The maintenance guys, and I know JWB is doing the same, because I hear it every time. I get a mail once a month, which I sometimes doesn't even open. I get a notification, hey, this tenant has given notice, we're looking for the new guy, we're doing the turnover, this is your invoice. I love that. I've got everything is just happening.
That's great. Jim, I kind of want to key in on this, right? Because you mentioned waiting lists, right? And I know that is something we talk a lot about on the show. Of everywhere else kind of has these waiting lists. JWB has properties right now that you can put a deposit on, and you can sign up. And I know from your perspective, that's put a lot of pressure on you with like the material shortages and everything that's been going on with construction. You want to talk to us a little bit about how you're able to continue to bring product to the marketplace even when everybody else has a waiting list?
Yeah. Well, a lot of it is our long-term relationships with our contractors. I know just this morning I was able to acquire some product that we've been having a real difficult time finding through some resources that I've had over the years. And it kind of speaks to the same that Willem brought up about the trust of watching or managing the property for you. We have such good relationships with the contractors that we work with that we can count on them to deliver on time. We can count on them to follow up and provide good work that, you don't have to go back and talk to the plumber and question those kind of things, because they've been working for us for a long time and they know what's expected of them and we know what we can expect from them. It is a challenge right now getting anything done. It was everybody in Jacksonville, every builder is building. There was a huge backlog at the building department, just getting permits out for a while. And then all of a sudden they spit out hundreds of permits, and then we're trying to fight over the subcontractors to get the work done. So it is difficult, but the wide relationships that we have are enabling us to keep things moving along.
Yeah. Relationship driven, like JWB is. I love seeing that echo reverberate throughout the organization, from like the internal team to the partners to the community and the clients. Willem, you before this call, we were talking about all the hurdles of securing financing for you. You want to tell us a little bit about some of your struggles in that area, and we can air it out here and be an open book so people can learn from it.
Yes, for sure. Look, when we used Mid-South, it was a walk in the park, because we put down a deposit and everything was done. So there was no questions asked, and it was convenient and easy. Once we start moving and away from that, looking for new construction, we realized that we had to get, there's just no way in which I can get that amount of money together. And leverage, as we always hear, that's where the deal is. It's in the leverage. It's not the house, it's the finance. Now, interesting enough, your interest rates, we've already had 2 increases since the beginning of the year because of inflation and this and that. And while the US is still thinking about it and they want to do it. We've already had 25 basis points. So for us to go to 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12% is just normal. That's not the way it is. So 7.25, when everybody said that's expensive, I was going, yeah, that's a bargain. So when we start moving out from there, first start off with bigger pockets. I think I've sent in something like 60 applications through providers that's on there. Says, you know what, they're willing to lend to foreigners. So that was the first thing. Out of that 60 applications or mails or questions, which was formalized in a way that they know who they're dealing with, I got 3 providers that said they can help us. And there was actually one that I ended up with that actually gave me a pre-approval, which was absolutely great. So ended up with a pre-approval. Before we ended up with JWB, we actually tried a provider in Texas, which didn't work out well. It just, the fact that mails don't get answered, that was it. We actually, even luckily before we got something, we realized it's going to backfire totally. But because of that provider, I was fortunate enough to get a pre-approval. So there was a way with continually trying and asking questions and sending in applications in a way, application is maybe the wrong word, an inquiry. Got providers that's willing to deal with me. And now at least I got a bit of a track record. So there's tax returns for 3 years, which helped a little bit. There's a bank account, which helped a bit. So all of these little things that you might not think is critical actually helps a lot towards the end goal. Got the pre-approval, got to JWB. They told me, sorry for you, we only use our own provider. So that wasn't very nice, but that's the rule. Eventually got to a point where I spoke to one of the lenders that said, yes, you're a foreigner, we can help you. Interest rate 4.85%, which was still great, 30% down, 4.85. And then we started the process selecting the property. And it was actually, despite the fact that I feel that I could have get a little bit more information because I didn't know, and I didn't know the right questions to ask also. Got a bit of a surprise when we didn't have enough cash showing in the account for a certain amount of time. So a little bit of information there would have been nice, but yeah, nobody can anticipate all these things. So yeah, it was fairly easy in terms of what we had to do through JWB's provider. We submitted a few documents, bank statements mostly. I didn't even did the tax returns.
Letters.
Oh yes, yeah, letters of reference from the bank and the accountant, and that's maybe the thing that the people doesn't realize. I've been banking with the same bank for forever, 25, 30 years. We had the same accountant for 20 years. Now, those little things that you think means nothing actually now means a lot because letters go through. Okay, right, I've been here for a while. They don't think I'm at risk, and yeah, so small things make a huge difference. And yeah, it was fairly painless. I think it was easier to get a loan in the US than I would have got one locally, to be very honest, which is, again, the reason we're moving away to the USA in terms of property.
Interesting, man. Yeah, you bring up something that I totally echoed with, and it's that this one, dealing with the lender is the one thing. While JWB tries to control the whole ecosystem of the transaction and they're vertically integrated, they ask that you go with certain lenders so that they can ensure as good of an experience as possible, but it's still an outside partner. So there is some times where being proactive about the questions like how much minimum you need in your account in order to make sure it happens and things of the sort is in the best interest of the investor. So I'm glad you shared that. You said that you had moved the transaction to like invest in a little bit of crypto and because you had that balance, it kind of delayed you for a couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, I did my calculation, according to the down payment and estimated closing cost. And then obviously I worked in the deposit we sent over, or that was required by JWB, the $5,000 deposit. So that became part of my calculation because, the money is there, but it's not part of their calculation. So there's little things that we learned. And yeah, we moved money out of the account in the US, the Bank of America account. And as things were happening, it was just, we did a transfer on request of the provider for another 10,000 US, and it actually arrived through wire from South Africa to the US 1 day after the closing statement date. And the guys doesn't accept there's almost like a transaction record, but the transaction record doesn't show my name and account number. So the money is there, you can see it, but it doesn't show in the statement. And sorry for you, it needs to show in the statement. So we actually had to wait for the new statement date, which was the 1st of February. Send the statement, everybody was happy.
Yeah, so you just got to be extra proactive. I appreciate the assist by Melinda. Thank you, Melinda, for clarifying things and keeping the conversation going. Willem, we're running out of time here. You know, Mike Foster has this question. What are your plans moving forward as far as your rental property portfolio? What do you see in your near future? And what advice would you give to anybody that's thinking about getting into this asset class?
The interesting thing is it always changes. And then maybe I can answer that question very easily. Remember, the Memphis stuff is on a 10-year bond or 10-year mortgage. So I started 5 years ago, so we're halfway there. Now that cash flow now jumps from $100 to $600 or $100 to $700 a month, which makes a huge difference because my timeline is 10 years. So in terms of cash flow, so that will actually make a huge jump in my cash flow. And therefore I will not obviously move those or sell those properties to go for a 30-year bond or 30-year mortgage with a very low cash flow. So the JWB stuff is the boosters. You know, this is the gamble for me. Should make a little bit of money, and I hope for the appreciation. If it doesn't appreciate, I'll stick around. So this is the booster property. So that will actually, this should hopefully buy more properties as we go along. You know, buying one a year is the plan. But hopefully 5 years, if I'm optimistic, maybe this can roll into 2. If it goes not as according to plan, maybe it takes 10 years, but I don't need this cash flow. So this is the last resort in terms of, let's use this as the final backup plan and hopefully boost the portfolio as we go along with, because of the appreciation we hope for in Jacksonville, which I'm not hoping for in Memphis, but the cash flow there is great. So therefore, every provider's got his position, and I think everybody's, your plan need to be, you need to have a plan, and it does change, because I thought I would buy 10 from Memphis and it just didn't work out that way. So yeah, we had to pivot, and here we are. So everything's got its place as we move forward.
Yeah, that's a picture perfect example of a lot of the stuff we talk on the show, right? Different markets have different attributes. There are markets that cash flow and that can, you know, pay some bills and keep you kind of like growing a nest egg. And the beauty of the Jacksonville market is the appreciation, is the idea that you're able to really, really magnify your returns if you buy and hold for a long time, and you're clearly doing that, Willem. I really, really appreciate you being on the show. Jim, any final words on kind of as an investor from the construction side, what to look forward to and things that maybe you want to think about when you are getting into this asset class, and maybe give a little advice out there?
Well, I think diversifying, and I think that's kind of what Willem had talked about, is diversifying and maybe buying some new construction as well as some renovated properties will give you the ability to kind of see both sides of that and not really kind of get jaded one way or the other. I know that since I'm responsible for the new construction and the renovation and the property turn, I have to kind of change those hats almost on a daily basis to look at things a little bit differently. Obviously, when we're looking at a property turn, getting the house ready for the next renter, we're also looking for possible long-term maintenance items that we can address at that time, because we have a lot of clients like Willem that are not here and they can't see the property. So we want to be their eyes and ears and kind of keep an eye on that for them so that there aren't any big surprises.
There you go. I appreciate that. And gentlemen, you did a great job, right? Like, this is the first time that I have a guest investor and the guest co-host at the same time. You both made it really super easy for me. This has been great, fellas. Thank you for a bunch of value adding. Thank you to our community who shows up. We have 32 plus people, an hour and 5 minutes late into here. You know, like, never goes unnoticed that you take an hour of your day to show up and hang out with us here in the middle of a work day. This is really, really fun to get to do. Again, if you want some personal advice on owning rental properties in your portfolio, on best-in-class property management services in your portfolio, or an edge in the Jacksonville market, go to chatwithjwb.com. And that's it. We'll see you on the show next Tuesday. Hope you had a great time.